The autumn breeze carried the scent of rain as Mei Lin stepped out of her car, pausing to look up at the elegant facade of Bellamy Restaurant. The soft glow from inside illuminated the street as evening settled over the city. She tugged at the sleeve of her worn navy sweater, suddenly aware of how out of place she might look. Her jeans weren't designer, her boots showed signs of actual wear, and the only accessory she carried was a simple leather notebook tucked under her arm. But appearances were deceiving. Just 30 minutes earlier, May had signed the final paperwork, making her the new owner of Bellamy, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. After years of building her restaurant group from a single food truck to 5 successful establishments, this acquisition was the crown jewel of her quiet empire. Time to see how things really run around here, she murmured to herself, pushing open the heavy glass door. The hostess, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, gave May a quick once-over. Her smile flickered for just a moment. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" Her tone was polite but cool. "No, I don't. I was hoping you might have a table available," May replied warmly. The hostess glanced down at her tablet, tapping a few times. "We're quite busy tonight." She hesitated, looking over May's casual attire again. Before she could continue, a man approached from behind her. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit with a burgundy tie, and his dark hair was styled with precision. A silver name tag on his lapel read Victor Manager. "Is there a problem, Diane?" His voice was smooth but carried authority. "This guest doesn't have a reservation," Diane explained, emphasizing the word guest just enough to convey meaning. Victor's eyes swept over May, taking in her simple clothes and minimal makeup. The corners of his mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "I see," he said, checking the tablet himself. "Well, we do have a few tables, but our dining room is primarily for guests with reservations." The way he said it made clear what he thought of walk-ins, especially ones who looked like they might balk at the prices. May nodded pleasantly, pretending not to notice his tone. "I understand. But if you do have space, I'd really appreciate a table. I've heard wonderful things about your chef's special sea bass." Victor seemed to consider her for a moment, then nodded curtly. "We can accommodate you." He snapped his fingers lightly at Diane. "Table 17. May caught the slight widening of Diane's eyes before the hostess nodded. "Of course. This way, please." As May followed Diane through the dining room, she noted how the lighting created intimate pools of warmth around each table, how soft music played at just the right volume for conversation, and how the gentle clink of silverware against fine china created a pleasant background rhythm. She also noted how several empty tables with reserved signs were positioned by windows or in cozy alcoves. Table 17, it turned out, was tucked in a corner near the swinging kitchen doors, where servers bustled in and out carrying steaming plates. The lighting was harsher here, the noise level significantly higher, and a draft could be felt each time the doors opened. "Your server will be with you shortly," Diane said, placing a menu on the table before hurrying away. May settled into her chair, positioning herself to observe the entire restaurant. From this vantage point, she could see Victor speaking to a waiter and gesturing in her direction. The waiter glanced over, nodded, and then approached her table with visible reluctance. "Good evening. My name is Trent. I'll be your server tonight." His greeting lacked the warmth she'd observed him showing to other tables.
"Can I get you something to drink?"
"Just water for now, please, and I'd love to hear about today's specials," May replied. Trent recited the specials in a monotone, barely making eye contact. "I'll give you a moment to look at the menu." As May studied the offerings, she watched the rhythm of the restaurant unfold around her. Victor moved between tables, stopping to chat with patrons dressed in evening wear and expensive casual attire. His laugh was practiced and charming as he bent to whisper recommendations to a couple wearing matching Rolex watches. Trent returned with her water, placing it on the table with minimal ceremony. "Have you decided?" "Yes, I'd like the sea bass, please. And perhaps a glass of the Sancerre to start?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face, perhaps at her wine knowledge or perhaps at ordering one of the pricier dishes. "Of course. Anything else?" "That will be fine for now, thank you." As Trent walked away, May opened her notebook and began jotting down observations. The food quality, according to her research, was excellent. Chef Anton Rivera had trained in Paris and Barcelona, and his fusion of Mediterranean and Asian influences had earned the restaurant considerable acclaim. But a restaurant was more than just its food. From her uncomfortable corner, May watched as Victor personally delivered an amuse-bouche to a table of 4 well-dressed business people, explaining the dish with flourishes and charm. Their table had been presented with complimentary champagne when they arrived, a courtesy not extended to most other diners. "That's the Lawrence Group," a voice said nearby. May glanced up to see a busboy clearing the adjacent table. He was young, perhaps just out of high school, with kind eyes that crinkled when he noticed her watching the interaction. "They come every month. Mr. Victor always handles them personally." May smiled. "Is that so?" The busboy nodded. "He says they're important clients. Most important clients get the VIP treatment, complimentary drinks, special attention from the chef." He trailed off, suddenly looking nervous. "I should get back to work." "Of course. Thank you," May said. The young man hurried away with his tray of dishes. Her wine arrived, delivered by a different server who placed it on the table without a word and disappeared before May could thank him. Minutes later, she overheard Victor speaking to Trent just beyond the kitchen doors. "Don't waste too much time on table 17. Those types never tip well anyway. Just get her in and out." "But she ordered the sea bass and Sancerre." Trent's voice was hesitant, probably stretching her budget to impress someone who didn't even show up. "Trust me, I've seen it 100 times. Victor's laugh was dismissive. "Focus on the Carmichael party. They just ordered their second bottle of Dom Perignon." May made another note in her book, keeping her expression neutral. She'd experienced this type of treatment before in her earlier days, before her success, and it still stung. But now it was valuable research. When her sea base arrived, it was beautifully presented but lukewarm, suggesting it had been left sitting while hotter dishes were prioritized. Despite this, the flavors were complex and delightful. Chef Rivera's talent was evident even in a neglected dish. May ate slowly, observing how differently the staff treated various patrons. A woman in an elegant black dress had her napkin refolded each time she left the table. A man in a custom suit received personal wine recommendations from Victor himself. Meanwhile, a family with teenage children, dressed well but not extravagantly, received competent but cooler service. As she finished her meal, Victor passed by her table, speaking loudly to a server about a wine shipment. "We'll save the Chateau Margaux for guests who can appreciate it." "Of course." His eyes slid over May as if she were part of the furniture. Trent dropped off her check without asking if she wanted dessert or coffee. "Whenever you're ready," he said flatly. May examined the bill, noting that she hadn't been charged for the wine. Interesting. Was it a simple oversight? Or did they assume she might complain about the price? She placed her credit card on the tray with the bill. When Trent returned with the receipt, his eyes widened slightly at the generous tip she'd left. "Thank you for dining with us," he said, a hint of genuine warmth in his voice for the first time. May smiled. "The sea base was excellent. Please give my compliments to Chef Rivera." She gathered her notebook and stood to leave. As she walked toward the exit, Victor was greeting a group of new arrivals, his manner effusive and welcoming. He barely glanced at May as she passed. Stepping outside, May took a deep breath of the cool night air. The experience had been enlightening, if not entirely pleasant. She had 3 more days before the official announcement of new ownership, and she planned to use that time wisely. "Well, Victor," she whispered to herself as she unlocked her car, "I think we have a lot to talk about on Monday." She drove away from Bellamy Restaurant, already planning the changes she would implement, starting with how guests were valued not by their appearance or perceived wealth, but by the simple fact that they had chosen to share their evening at her restaurant. Maylin returned to Bellamy Restaurant the following evening, this time dressed in a simple blue dress that, while neat, was clearly not designer. She'd pulled her hair back in a practical bun and wore minimal jewelry, a stark contrast to the glittering patrons who typically frequented the establishment. Her notebook was tucked discreetly in her purse. Tonight's visit had a purpose beyond observation. She wanted to see how consistent the treatment was and if perhaps yesterday had been an anomaly. As the soon-to-be-announced owner, she needed to understand the restaurant's culture thoroughly before making changes. The same hostess, Diane, was at the front desk. Recognition flickered in her eyes before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation tonight?" Her tone carried the same cool politeness as before. No, I'm afraid not. Is that still a problem? May asked with a friendly smile. Before Diane could answer, Victor appeared as if summoned by some sixth sense that alerted him to potential disruptions in his carefully curated dining room. You were here yesterday, he stated rather than asked, his voice carrying a hint of surprise and something else, perhaps annoyance that a casual walk-in had returned. Yes, I was. The sea base was wonderful, May replied pleasantly. I thought I'd try the duck tonight if you have a table available. Victor's gaze swept over her again, taking in her modest attire. His smile didn't reach his eyes. How loyal of you to return. Diane, please seat Ms. Lynn, May supplied. May Lynn, Ms. Lynn at table 17 again, since she seemed so comfortable there yesterday. Diane nodded, picking up a menu. This way, please. As they walked through the dining room, May noticed several open tables, including 2 window seats with excellent views of the twinkling city lights. Yet once again she was led to the noisy corner by the kitchen doors. Enjoy your meal, Diane said with slightly more warmth than yesterday before retreating to her station. May settled in, arranging herself to once again observe the dining room. The restaurant was slightly less crowded than the previous night being a Tuesday, but still had a healthy number of patrons. The gentle hum of conversation mixed with soft classical music created a pleasant backdrop for the dining experience, at least for those seated away from the kitchen. Trent appeared at her table, recognition in his eyes. Good evening. You're back. The food was too good to stay away, May replied with a warm smile. How are you tonight, Trent? The server seemed taken aback by the personal question. Most patrons treated servers as invisible, especially at establishments like Bellamy. I'm fine, thank you. Can I get you something to drink tonight? A glass of the Pinot Noir would be lovely. Trent nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with her wine. This time he placed it on the table with slightly more care than the previous night. Perhaps her generous tip had made an impression. Have you decided on your meal? He asked, his pen poised over his notepad. The duck, please, and perhaps the seasonal salad to start. Good choices. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice. The duck is excellent. Chef Rivera uses a cherry port reduction that's remarkable. May smiled, noting the small shift in his demeanor. That sounds perfect. Thank you for the recommendation. As Trent walked away, May sipped her wine and observed Victor working the room. He moved from table to table, but not randomly. She noticed a pattern. He focused his attention on patrons wearing expensive watches or designer clothes, those ordering premium bottles of wine, or those he seemed to recognize as regulars. At one table, he bent down in animated conversation with a middle-aged couple, laughing heartily at something the man said. The woman wore a necklace that May recognized as a piece that would cost more than what most people made in a month. Mr. Cho always makes Victor laugh like that, said a quiet voice. May looked up to see the young busboy from yesterday, clearing the neighboring table again. Is that so? She asked. The boy nodded. He owns half the real estate in the financial district. Always orders the 1982 Bordeaux. Victor says we should never keep him waiting, not even for a water refill. And what about other guests? May asked casually. The busboy glanced around nervously. We're supposed to be attentive to everyone, of course. But he hesitated. Some tables are more priority than others. That's what Victor tells us during staff meetings. I see. And what's your name? May asked. Lee, he replied. I've been working here for 6 months, trying to save for culinary school. That's wonderful, May said sincerely. Do you get to learn much from Chef Rivera? Lee's eyes lit up.
Sometimes, when it's slow, he shows me techniques.
He's amazing with knife skills. His expression fell slightly. Victor doesn't like kitchen staff lingering in the dining room, though. I should go. May watched him hurry away, making another mental note. Chef Rivera teaching a busboy showed character. That was promising. Her salad arrived, beautifully arranged with edible flowers and a light vinaigrette. As she ate, she observed a middle-aged couple being seated several tables away. They were dressed well, but not ostentatiously. Good quality clothes that suggested comfort rather than status. May noticed Victor's cursory greeting, nothing like the warm welcome he'd given to the jewel-laden woman earlier. Halfway through her salad, raised voices from the kitchen caught her attention. The swinging doors burst open and Victor emerged, his face tight with controlled anger. Behind him, a young waitress looked close to tears. Completely unacceptable, Victor was saying in a harsh whisper that carried to May's table. The Williamsons are platinum members of our dining club. You cannot tell them the kitchen is too busy to accommodate a special request. But Chef Rivera said the modification would compromise the dish. The waitress protested. Weakly, Chef Rivera works for this restaurant, and this restaurant works for its premium guests, Victor snapped. Go back and tell him to make it happen or I'll do it myself. The waitress nodded miserably and pushed back through the kitchen doors. Victor straightened his tie, composed his features, and turned, only to find May watching him. For a brief moment his mask slipped, revealing annoyance at being observed during an unpleasant moment. He approached her table with a tight smile. Is everything to your satisfaction, Ms. Lin? The salad is delightful, May replied calmly. Your chef has a wonderful touch with balancing flavors. Victor nodded curtly. Yes, he's quite talented, though sometimes he needs reminding that we're in the hospitality business. The last part seemed directed toward the kitchen rather than to May. And what does hospitality mean to you, Victor? May asked, genuinely curious about his answer. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Excuse me? Hospitality. I'm just curious how you define it as a restaurant manager. Victor recovered quickly. Hospitality is giving guests what they want, of course. Particularly those who appreciate and are willing to pay for the finer things. He glanced pointedly at her simple dress. Though we try to accommodate all types of guests when possible. How generous, May replied with a smile that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Victor seemed uncertain whether she was mocking him. Yes, well, enjoy your duck. I'm sure Trent will take good care of you. With that, he moved away to attend to a table where a bottle of champagne had just been ordered. When her duck arrived, it was perfectly cooked, the skin crisp and the meat tender, with the promised cherry port reduction adding rich complexity. Despite being seated at the worst table and receiving the bare minimum of attention from management, the food itself was impeccable. As she ate, she watched Victor stopping by a nearby table where a young couple was celebrating what appeared to be an anniversary. The woman mentioned it was their first time at Bellamy, saved up for as a special treat. Victor's smile remained fixed, but his enthusiasm dimmed visibly. He spent less than 30 seconds at their table before moving on to greet a loud group of business executives who had just been seated in a prime location. By the time May finished her duck, she had filled several pages in her notebook. The excellence of the food was undeniable. The problem was everything else, or rather, everyone responsible for the atmosphere, particularly Victor. When Trent brought her check, she noticed she'd been charged full price for everything tonight. No missing wine charge like yesterday. Perhaps Victor had spotted the error. Was everything to your satisfaction? Trent asked, his manner more professional than the previous night. The food was exceptional, May replied honestly. Chef Rivera is very talented. I'll pass that along to him, Trent said with a genuine smile. Please do. She handed him her credit card. And Trent? Thank you for the wine recommendation. It paired beautifully with the duck. He looked pleased at the acknowledgement. When he returned with her receipt, she again left a generous tip. As she signed, she heard Victor's voice from a nearby table. Slightly too loud. Wasting a perfectly good table on someone who orders the cheapest wine by the glass, he was saying to Diane. Next time, tell her we're fully booked. May tucked her copy of the receipt into her purse alongside her notebook. As she stood to leave, she caught the eye of Lee, the busboy, who offered her a small smile. She returned it warmly. At the door, Victor was chatting with the hostess. He gave May a perfunctory nod as she passed. Have a good evening, he said dismissively. Oh, I will, May replied. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again very soon. Something in her tone made Victor pause. But May was already stepping out into the cool evening air, her mind filled with plans for Monday. Morning staff meeting, her first official appearance as the new owner of Bellamy Restaurant. Monday morning arrived, with golden autumn sunshine streaming through the windows of Bellamy Restaurant. For the first time since purchasing the establishment, Maylene dressed the part of a successful business owner. She wore a tailored charcoal pantsuit with a deep blue silk blouse, her hair styled in a sleek bob that framed her face. Small pearl earrings and a matching necklace completed her professional appearance. She carried a leather portfolio containing her notes from the weekend visits along with the official ownership documents. The restaurant wouldn't open for lunch service until noon. But May had arranged for all staff to be present at 10 a.m. for what they believed was a routine meeting to introduce the new owner. Only her lawyer, Mr. Huang, and the restaurant's financial advisor knew her identity. May arrived 20 minutes early, pausing outside to take a deep breath. The experiences of the past 2 evenings had been illuminating, if somewhat disheartening. Chef Rivera's food was everything she'd hoped, but the atmosphere created by the management left much to be desired. Today would mark the beginning of change. She entered through the front door where Mr. Huang was waiting for her. "Good morning, Ms. Lin," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "All the paperwork is ready. The staff has been arriving since 9:30. They're gathered in the private dining room as requested." "Thank you, Thomas," May replied with a smile. "How's the mood?" "Curious, mostly. A bit anxious. Change makes people nervous." He lowered his voice. "The manager, Victor, has been particularly concerned. I overheard him speculating that the new owner might bring in their own management team." May nodded thoughtfully. "That would be the conventional approach, wouldn't it?" "Indeed. Though I've learned you rarely take the conventional approach," Mr. Huang replied with a slight smile. "Life's more interesting that way," May said, squaring her shoulders. "Shall we?" They walked through the main dining room, which looked different in daylight, more ordinary, less enchanted. The afternoon sun revealed dust on some of the light fixtures and a slight wear to the carpet that evening lighting had concealed. May noted these details mentally as they approached the private dining room. The double doors were open, revealing about 25 people seated around tables arranged in a U-shape. Conversations hushed as May and Mr. Huang entered. At the front of the room stood Victor, impeccably dressed as always. Beside an older man May recognized as the financial advisor, Mr. Patterson. Victor's expression was politely attentive as he watched them enter, clearly not recognizing May in her business attire. The contrast between his treatment of her now, his eyes taking in her quality clothing and professional demeanor, and during her previous visits was striking. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Patterson began, stepping forward. "Thank you all for coming in early today. As you know, Bellamy Restaurant has recently been acquired by Lin Restaurant Group. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to the founder and CEO of that group, Ms. May Lin." A polite smattering of applause filled the room. May stepped forward with a warm smile, watching the faces of the staff. Most showed simple curiosity or professional interest. A few, like Lee the busboy, looked excited at the prospect of new ownership. And then there was Victor. The moment Mr. Patterson had spoken her name, Victor's expression had frozen. His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed as confusion gave way to dawning horror. The polite smile slipped from his face like melting ice, replaced by a pallor that made the dark circles under his eyes more pronounced. His hand, which had started to rise for a handshake, halted mid-air before dropping limply to his side. May met his gaze directly, acknowledging him with a small, professional nod before turning her attention to the rest of the staff. "Thank you for the warm welcome," she began. "I'm delighted to meet all of you officially today, though some of us have already crossed paths." Her eyes briefly met Victor's again, then moved on to Trent, who was sitting near the back looking perplexed. "I've spent the past 15 years building restaurants that combine exceptional food with genuine hospitality. When the opportunity to acquire Bellamy came up, I couldn't resist. The culinary reputation of this establishment is outstanding, thanks to the talented Chef Rivera and his team." She nodded toward the chef, a stocky man with intense eyes who sat with his arms crossed, watching her carefully. "Before making any changes or setting new directions, I wanted to experience Bellamy as a regular guest would, so I visited twice last week anonymously." A murmur rippled through the room. Trent's eyes widened in recognition, and Lee, the busboy, clapped a hand over his mouth. "Those visits showed me 2 things," May continued. "First, the food here is truly exceptional. Every dish I tried was beautifully executed, with flavors that speak to Chef Rivera's talent and vision." The chef's stern expression softened slightly at the genuine compliment. "Second," she paused, her tone growing more serious, "I learned that excellent food alone doesn't create an exceptional dining experience. Hospitality matters just as much, and hospitality means treating every guest with respect and attention, regardless of what they're wearing or how much they're spending." From the corner of her eye, May could see Victor shift uncomfortably, his tie suddenly seeming too tight around his neck. My vision for Bellamy is to maintain the culinary excellence while creating an environment where every guest feels valued, where a couple celebrating their anniversary receives the same warm welcome as a business executive ordering expensive champagne, where a person dining alone in casual clothes isn't relegated to the worst table by the kitchen doors. Several staff members glanced toward Victor, who was now staring fixedly at the table in front of him. I believe everyone in this room has an important role to play in that vision. From the kitchen staff to the servers to management, May continued. Over the next few weeks, I'll be meeting with each department to hear your ideas and concerns. This is an evolution, not a revolution. Many things will stay the same, particularly our commitment to quality food. She moved around the table, making eye contact with different staff members as she spoke. But some things will change. Our measure of success won't just be our profit margin or average check size. It will include guest satisfaction across all demographics, employee satisfaction, and community impact. The restaurants in my group are known for being places where everyone is welcome, and everyone is treated with dignity. May paused beside Lee, who looked up at her with wide eyes. Sometimes our best insights come from unexpected places. I'm interested in hearing from all of you, no matter your position or seniority. She returned to the front of the room. I'll be working closely with each of you, but particularly with the management team, to implement these changes. Mr. Victor Chen will continue as manager during this transition period. Victor's head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. He had clearly expected to be fired on the spot. Now, I'd like Chef Rivera to share his thoughts on the upcoming seasonal menu changes, and then we'll discuss some immediate renovations to improve the dining space. As Chef Rivera stood to speak, Victor remained frozen in his chair, his normally confident demeanor shattered. When the chef finished his brief presentation about autumn ingredients and new dishes, Mr. Patterson reviewed some financial matters. Finally, May wrapped up the meeting. Thank you all for your attention this morning. Regular shifts will resume for lunch service today. Mr. Chen, could I speak with you privately in your office? The staff filed out, many stopping to introduce themselves personally to May. Trent approached with an embarrassed expression. Ms. Lin, I want to apologize for... May shook her head. No apologies necessary, Trent. You were following the tone set by management. That's exactly what we'll be addressing going forward. Lee hovered nearby until most others had left. Ms. Lin, I just wanted to say I'm really excited about your ideas, especially treating everyone the same no matter what they look like. May smiled warmly. Thank you, Lee. And I hear you're interested in culinary school? His eyes widened. Yes, ma'am. I've been saving up. Let's talk about that soon. I believe in supporting staff education. She made a note in her portfolio. Now better get ready for lunch service. Finally, only Victor remained, his usual poise replaced by nervous tension as he led May to his office. A small but well-appointed room with awards and certificates lining the walls. Please, sit down, he offered, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. May took the seat, placing her portfolio on her lap. You seem surprised to see me, Victor. He swallowed hard. Ms. Lin, I want to apologize for the way you were treated during your visits. Had I known who you were? That's exactly the problem, May interrupted gently. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the same welcome, the same attentive service, the same dignity, whether they're wearing designer labels or department store clothes, whether they're ordering water or vintage wine. Victor's face flushed. I understand, and I accept full responsibility. If you're looking for my resignation, I'm not, May said, surprising him again. At least not yet. What I'm looking for is change. The question is whether you're capable of it. She opened her portfolio and pulled out several pages of notes. Let's talk about what I observed, what needs to change, and what your role might be in the new Bellamy. That is, if you're interested in being part of it. Victor straightened in his chair, his expression a complex mix of relief, shame, and uncertainty. I am, he said quietly. I've been with Bellamy for 8 years. It means everything to me. Then let's begin, May said, uncapping her pen. We have a lot to discuss before lunch service starts. Victor sat across from May in his office, the space suddenly feeling smaller than it ever had before. The certificates and awards on the walls that usually gave him confidence now seemed to mock him. 8 years of building his reputation as one of the city's premier restaurant managers, and in just 2 evenings, he had revealed his true character to his new boss. "I'd like to go through my notes from my visits," May said, her voice professional but not unkind. "Not to embarrass you, but because I believe in addressing issues directly." Victor nodded stiffly. "Of course. On Friday evening when I first arrived without a reservation, you seated me at table 17, the worst table in the restaurant, next to the kitchen doors, despite several better tables being available. You then instructed Trent to, and I quote, 'Don't waste too much time on table 17. Those types never tip well anyway. Just get her in and out.'" Victor's face flushed. "Ms. Lin, she held up a hand. "Please let me finish. On Saturday evening when I returned, you recognized me but still seated me at the same poor table. You told Diane to tell me the restaurant was fully booked if I tried to return again. You also made a comment within my hearing about wasting a perfectly good table on someone who orders the cheapest wine by the glass." She looked up from her notes, meeting his eyes directly. "The wine I ordered, by the way, was not the cheapest by the glass. It was mid-range. But that's beside the point." Victor looked down at his hands, which were clasped tightly on the desk. "I remember," he said quietly. "There were other incidents," May continued. "You spent an average of 3 minutes with guests in designer clothing, or those ordering expensive bottles of wine. For other guests, your interactions lasted less than 30 seconds. You personally delivered amuse-bouche to some tables and not to others. You reprimanded a server for telling a premium guest that their special request might compromise a dish, insisting that Chef Rivera should accommodate them regardless of culinary considerations." She closed her notebook and set it aside. "What I find most interesting is that you never actually asked me anything about myself. You looked at my clothes, made assumptions about my financial status, and decided I wasn't worth your time. You never knew that I owned 4 other successful restaurants, that I started with a food truck 10 years ago and built a restaurant group valued at over $20 million, or that I was there specifically to evaluate Bellamy for acquisition." Victor's shoulders slumped slightly. The silence in the room felt heavy. "What would you have done differently if you had known who I was?" May asked. Victor looked up, his expression pained. "I would have given you our best table. I would have personally attended to your meal. I would have introduced you to Chef Rivera. I would have—" He trailed off, seeming to suddenly understand the trap in his own words. "Exactly," May said softly. "And that's the problem. The special treatment shouldn't be reserved for people you think are important. Every guest who walks through that door deserves respect and attention." "I understand," Victor said quietly. "Do you?" May challenged. "Because I'm not sure you do. Tell me, why did you treat me differently based on how I was dressed?" Victor shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, in fine dining, we cater to a certain clientele, people who appreciate and can afford the finer things. And you can tell that by looking at someone's clothes? Not always, but generally, and yes." He paused, considering. "In my experience, guests in designer clothing tend to spend more, tip better, and become regulars. And that makes them more valuable than other guests?" Victor opened his mouth, then closed it again. When he finally spoke, his voice was less certain. "I was taught that way, yes. At the Pierre in New York, then at Le Ciel in Paris. The focus was always on the high-spending regulars. That's just how fine dining works." May leaned forward slightly. "That may be how it has worked traditionally. That doesn't mean it's how it should work, or how it will work in my restaurants." She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the dining room, where staff were preparing for lunch service. "Tell me about Lee," she said unexpectedly. Victor looked confused by the change in topic. "The busboy. He's a good worker, reliable, never late. What else do you know about him?" Victor hesitated. "Not much. He's young. I think he mentioned wanting to be a chef someday. He's been saving for culinary school," May said. "Did you know that Chef Rivera has been teaching him knife skills when the restaurant is slow?" Surprise flickered across Victor's face. "No, I didn't. Because you told kitchen staff not to linger in the dining room. You created barriers between front and back of house. You made assumptions about Lee based on his position, just as you made assumptions about me based on my clothes." She turned back to face him. "That's not the culture I want at Bellamy." Victor nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. "What kind of culture do you want?" May returned to her seat. "One where we see people, really see them. where we recognize that the couple saving up for months to celebrate their anniversary might appreciate our food and service just as much as the regular who drops $5,000 on dinner every month, where we value each guest's experience equally, regardless of what they spend. She opened her portfolio again, pulling out a different set of notes. I've been looking at your financials. Bellamy is profitable, but your customer retention could be better. Your online reviews mention excellent food but inconsistent service. Several commenters specifically mentioned feeling unwelcome or being treated dismissively. Victor winced. I hadn't realized. My other restaurants have lower check averages than Bellamy but higher retention rates and stronger reviews. We've found that creating an inclusive, welcoming atmosphere actually drives more business, not less. People return when they feel valued, even if they're not big spenders. For the first time since the meeting began, Victor looked genuinely thoughtful, rather than just embarrassed. That makes sense. Here's what I'm proposing, May said, her tone becoming more businesslike. A 3-month trial period. You keep your position as manager, but we implement changes to the service model, starting with how we greet and seat guests. No more bad tables for certain types of customers. No more different levels of service based on appearances or spending. Victor nodded cautiously, and after 3 months, we evaluate whether you've been able to adapt to the new approach, whether you truly believe in it or are just going through the motions, whether the staff responds well to your leadership under the new model. She held his gaze steadily. I won't keep someone in management who doesn't share my values, no matter how experienced they are. Something unexpected flickered in Victor's eyes, not resentment, but a spark of challenge. And if we increase both customer satisfaction and profitability during those 3 months? A smile touched May's lips. Then we'll discuss your future with the company more broadly. I'm expanding and I need leaders who understand my vision. Victor straightened slightly. I'd like that opportunity. Good, May said. Now I want to address the staff hierarchy. I notice significant division between front and back of house. Let's talk about how to foster more collaboration. For the next hour, they discussed operational changes, from seating policies to staff training. Victor, initially defensive, gradually became more engaged. His expertise in fine dining operations was evident, and once he moved past his embarrassment, he began offering thoughtful suggestions on how to maintain high standards while creating a more inclusive atmosphere. The private dining room is underutilized, he pointed out, showing May the booking calendar. We could offer it to local community groups for meetings on slower nights, build goodwill and bring in new guests who might not otherwise consider Bellamy accessible to them. May nodded, pleased. Exactly the kind of thinking we need. As their meeting wound down, Victor hesitated, then spoke more personally than he had all morning. Ms. Lin, I want to say again how truly sorry I am for how I treated you. There's no excuse. You're right, there isn't, May agreed. But there is an opportunity to learn and grow. That's what I'm offering you, Victor. Not just forgiveness, but a chance to be better. She stood, gathering her materials. My father ran a small noodle shop in Chinatown. When I started my first restaurant, I was turned away from meetings with suppliers who took one look at me and decided I wasn't serious. I couldn't get certain distributors to return my calls until I hired a white man to make them. She smiled slightly at the memory. I learned quickly that success in this industry isn't just about good food. It's about overcoming people's assumptions and biases. Victor absorbed this, nodding slowly. I never thought about it that way. Few people do until they've experienced it themselves. May checked her watch. Lunch service starts in 20 minutes. I'll be observing today, but as a known entity this time. I want you to run service as you normally would, but keep our conversation in mind. As they walked back into the dining room, the staff was busy with final preparations. Lee was carefully arranging water glasses, his movements precise and careful. Lee, May called. The young man looked up, startled. After your shift today, I'd like you to join me and Chef Rivera for a meeting about your culinary education. Lee's eyes widened. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Victor watched this exchange, something shifting in his expression. As May moved away to speak with Chef Rivera, he approached Lee. You've been working on your knife skills? He asked. Lee nodded hesitantly as if expecting a reprimand. I'd like to see what you've learned sometime, Victor said. Perhaps you could help with prep for the staff meal tomorrow. The surprise and cautious hope on the young man's face said everything about how unusual this interaction was. I'd like that, sir. Thank you. As the first lunch guests began to arrive, May took a seat at the small manager's table in the corner of the dining room, where she could observe operations. She watched as Victor greeted the first party, a pair of older women in simple clothes who had come for a birthday lunch. In the past, he might have passed them off to a server with minimal attention. Today he welcomed them warmly, asked about the occasion, and personally escorted them to a lovely table by the window. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. 3 months passed quickly at Bellamy Restaurant. The crisp autumn days gave way to winter's chill, and holiday decorations now adorned the elegant space. But the physical changes to the restaurant were minor compared to the transformation in its atmosphere. Mei Lin stood near the bar, observing the busy Friday evening service. The dining room hummed with conversation and laughter. Every table was filled, from the prime window seats to the area near the kitchen that had once been considered undesirable. After a minor renovation, even that corner had been transformed with better soundproofing, improved lighting, and a small decorative screen that created a cozier ambiance. "Ms. Lin," a warm voice greeted her. "The Patels just called to thank us for last night's anniversary dinner. They said it was the best dining experience they've had in years." May turned to see Victor approaching, tablet in hand. His suit was still impeccably tailored, his appearance professional as ever, but something fundamental had changed in his demeanor. The cold calculation that once shadowed his interactions had been replaced by genuine warmth. "That's wonderful to hear," May replied. "Weren't they seated at table 17? Victor smiled at the reference. "Indeed they were. Mrs. Patel mentioned that she felt like they had the best seat in the house." "Because they did," May said. "Every table is the best seat when the service makes guests feel that way." They moved through the dining room together, stopping occasionally to greet guests or address minor issues. May noted how differently Victor interacted with each table, not based on what they were wearing or ordering, but responding to their individual personalities and needs. For a young couple clearly on a special date, he was respectfully brief. For an elderly gentleman dining alone, he took a moment longer to chat about the evening's specials. "You've come a long way in 3 months," May observed as they reached the far side of the room. Victor nodded thoughtfully. "It's strange. I spent years thinking I was providing excellent service, but I was really just catering to wealth and status. Now I realize how many opportunities I missed to create truly memorable experiences for all our guests." "The numbers reflect the change," May said. "Our customer return rate is up 20%. Online reviews have improved dramatically. And despite your initial concerns, our revenue has increased, not decreased." "I've been meaning to ask about that," Victor said, lowering his voice slightly. "How is it possible that we're making more money when our approach is less focused on pushing expensive wines and premium add-ons?" May smiled. "Walk with me to the kitchen. I want to check on tonight's special before I answer that." They pushed through the swinging doors into the organized chaos of the kitchen. Chef Rivera called out orders in his commanding voice, while line cooks worked with focused precision. In one corner, partially separated from the main cooking area, Lee stood at a prep station, practicing advanced knife skills on vegetables for tomorrow's service. The young man had blossomed under the mentorship program May had created. 3 days a week, he attended culinary classes at the local community college, with Bellamy covering half his tuition. On the other days, he split his time between regular busboy duties and structured training in the kitchen. Lee looked up as they passed, offering a confident smile that would have been unimaginable 3 months ago. Victor returned the smile with an encouraging nod. "To answer your question," May said as they exited through the back of the kitchen into the small administrative hallway, "it's simple mathematics multiplied by human psychology. When guests feel genuinely welcomed and valued, they come back more often. They bring friends. They try new dishes. A couple that might have saved Bellamy for a once-a-year special occasion now returns every few months. And they tell others," Victor added, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Word of mouth has always been our best advertising." "Exactly," May confirmed. "Plus, servers who feel empowered to create excellent experiences for every guest are more engaged in their work. They make better recommendations, they notice details, they anticipate needs, all of which enhances the dining experience and, yes, often leads to higher sales naturally, not forcefully." They reached May's office, formerly a rarely used storage room that she had converted into a small but efficient workspace. "I've made my decision about your position," she said. closing the door behind them. The 3-month trial period ends today. Victor straightened his shoulders, his expression composed but tense. I understand. May took a seat behind her desk and gestured for him to sit across from her. When we started this experiment, I wasn't sure you could change. I've seen many managers in this industry who are so entrenched in the old ways of thinking that they simply cannot adapt. Their egos get in the way, or they genuinely believe that treating certain customers better than others is just good business. Victor nodded but remained silent, waiting for her verdict. What I've seen from you instead is something rare, genuine growth. You didn't just go through the motions. You embraced the philosophy behind the changes. She leaned forward slightly. Why is that? What changed for you? Victor considered the question carefully. At first, I was just trying to save my job, he admitted. But something happened during that first week after you revealed yourself as the owner. I seated an older couple, very simply dressed, at one of our best tables. The woman actually asked if I was sure the table was for them. When I assured her it was, she mentioned it was their 40th anniversary and they'd been saving for months to celebrate at Bellamy. He paused, a flash of emotion crossing his face. Under my old approach, I would have given them adequate service but saved my real attention for bigger spenders. Instead, I treated them like they were the most important guests in the restaurant that night. The genuine joy and appreciation on their faces, he shook his head slightly. It affected me more than I expected. And? May prompted, sensing there was more to the story. They've returned twice since then, bringing their adult children once. The son works for a tech company and has now booked our private dining room for a corporate event next month. Victor smiled. But that's not why the experience changed me. It was the simple human connection, the realization that I had the power to make someone's special day even more meaningful, regardless of what they were spending. May nodded, satisfied with his answer. That's why I've decided to not only keep you on as manager of Bellamy, but to offer you a broader role. I'm opening a 6th restaurant in the spring, and I need someone to help train the management staff across all locations, someone who understands both traditional fine dining standards and the more inclusive approach we're developing. Surprise and pleasure spread across Victor's face. I would be honored. Thank you for the opportunity, and for not firing me 3 months ago when you had every reason to. People deserve second chances when they're willing to learn from their mistakes, May said. Now let's get back out there. I noticed the Henderson party just arrived for their reservation. Together they returned to the dining room, where Trent was now the head server, having been promoted for his excellent work. At the host stand, Diane greeted guests with genuine warmth rather than the practiced, sometimes cool professionalism of the past. A middle-aged woman in a simple sweater and slacks entered alone, looking slightly hesitant. 3 months ago, she would have been assessed, judged, and seated accordingly. Tonight, Victor greeted her with the same respect he would show a celebrity. Good evening and welcome to Bellamy. Do you have a reservation? No, I'm so sorry, the woman apologized. I was in the neighborhood and remembered how much my late husband loved this place years ago. I just thought, well, I probably should have called first. Not at all, Victor assured her. We'd be delighted to seat you. Would you prefer a quiet corner or something with a view of the dining room? The woman looked surprised at being given a choice. A view would be lovely if it's not too much trouble. It's no trouble whatsoever, Victor said, picking up a menu. Please follow me. As they walked away, May felt a quiet satisfaction. The restaurant around her hummed with energy. Servers moving efficiently between tables, the gentle clink of fine glassware, the murmur of conversation, and occasional bursts of laughter. Chef Rivera's food was still exceptional, but now it was accompanied by service that matched its quality for every guest, not just the select few deemed worthy. She thought back to her first visit 3 months ago, seated by the noisy kitchen doors, watching Victor cater to wealthy patrons while dismissing others. The contrast with tonight couldn't be more striking. A text message illuminated her phone, the general manager of her original restaurant confirming tomorrow morning's staff meeting. May had a full schedule tomorrow, visiting 3 of her locations before ending with dinner at Bellamy, where she would officially announce the plans for the new restaurant. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, May watched Victor escort an elderly couple to their table, pulling out chairs and offering menu suggestions with genuine attention. The transformation in him reflected the transformation of Bellamy itself, still elegant and upscale, but now genuinely welcoming to all. Never judge a book by its cover, she murmured to herself, remembering her father's favorite saying from his days running the small noodle shop, where she had first learned about hospitality, or a customer by their clothes. It was a lesson Victor had learned the hard way, but sometimes those were the lessons that stuck the longest.